I think there's some serious myths about how to be successful. And one of them is that myth that we have to do it all ourselves. And the reality is, of course, we don't. In fact, I would argue that your listeners are right now, they are leading multiple teams. And the question is, are they aware of it?
Keith, welcome back to the show. Thanks again for being a guest.
I can count on the fact this is going to be a lot of fun.
Well, for the folks who may not be familiar with your work, I'll give just a little backstory. We had you on the show in 2020. It was live. We were in the middle of a pandemic. The world has shifted a lot since then. Maybe if you wouldn't mind starting us out, give a little bit of background, what you've been working on since the pandemic, and then we'll be excited to get into your newest work, which we'll go deep on today. But give us a little background.
Yeah, I think when we launched the beginning of the pandemic, I just written a book called Leading Without Authority. We talked a lot about how your audience can fundamentally be very bold leaders with or without having a defined team. And that's still a theme we're going to be talking a bit about today. But then during the pandemic, I really went very deep on the question of what did the pandemic have to teach us about working and leading in volatility in a world where we're all hybrid and remote. And I think it was such a powerful and rich learning experience. The problem that made me the saddest, though, is that very few organizations and very few people really changed the way they worked based on those lessons. We changed for a period of time where we worked, but then we rubber band and went back to old ways of working. So what you're going to be hearing a lot from me is what are the leap forwards that we need to be thinking about as individuals crushing it out there, as entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, leaders with teams of individuals, et cetera. So very excited to talk about the new book, as you know, called Never Lead Alone, and dive into it. Yeah.
Well, the subhead is also great. 10 shifts from leadership to teamship. And I think you hit the nail on the head, which is one of the reasons that I was very excited to have you back on the show. Is I've long been an advocate of, regardless of what it looks like on the outside, nobody does any of this stuff alone. Even for the entrepreneur, the solopreneur who feels like they're often alone, as we all do, we also simultaneously know that we need to bring people together to build our website and shape our offerings. And whether we're a photographer, a designer, a small business person on Main Street, it does take a village. And so in virtually every capacity, even if we're just leading our own charge, we're doing so alongside with for so many other people in our community. There's this idea of community that I've been, longstanding shouting from the mountaintops. And in many ways, that's exactly what this book is about. It's about not feeling like it's all on you and how to incorporate a handful of other folks in your journey. So I'm wondering, if the pandemic was part of what made you wise to the idea that, man, where we worked and how we worked were different, but there were some things that we didn't get right, and your book helps us get back on track there. Where would you over-index on what didn't work, and how can we get back to where we need to be?
I think there's some serious myths about how to be successful, and one of them is what you just mentioned a second ago, which is that myth that we have to do it all ourselves. And the reality is, of course, we don't. Yeah. In fact, I would argue that your listeners are right now, they are leading multiple teams. And the question is, are they aware of it?
Yes.
So, your marketing team, if you're out there, as Chase suggested, includes the people that are going to be doing your lead gen. If you're going to have an outside thought leadership group working with you, there are those individuals. If you have a co-writer on something, if you're using a social media team, if you're using a web team, whatever it is, these are individuals that are on your team. The question you have to ask yourself is, what kind of a leader are you of them, right? Are you treating them like a vendor where you're assigning them something and it's a hands-off relationship? Or are you embracing them as co-creators? Are you wrestling with them? Are you pushing each other higher? And by the way, your customers are on your team. Your clients are on your team. You need to recognize that in every major initiative you're leading, of course, you're going to want your customer's voice in that. Do you have extraordinary advocates for what you do who are willing to volunteer their time to make your services and your product even better? If so, they're in your team. So everything you do, you are leading a team. But the question, as I say again, is do you realize that, and are you acting that way?
You introduce this concept of teamship as opposed to entrepreneurship or
Well, as
or
opposed to leadership.
leadership. I mean,
Yeah.
talk to us a little bit
That's the
about
second myth. Thank you
the
for asking.
shift.
Like
Yeah.
the second myth is that that you as a leader are standing up on a pedestal, giving direction, setting strategy, giving feedback. I got to tell you, I mean, a good leader gives feedback. A great leader gets the team to give each other feedback. So imagine, here I am today. If you couldn't tell, I'm in a hotel room. I'm in a hotel room in Los Angeles, and I am at the global partners meeting of a major software firm. And I was just speaking to all of the partners of this major software firm. And it was interesting because the natural inclination is to speak from the stage of this software firm and to speak to individual partners. I flipped it on its head. I said to the people in the audience, for this partnership to work, every one of you needs to be a leader. What do you imagine could be better about the partnership with this organization? And how over the next 3 days could you initiate a team that would make it better? And the first person you invite into your team, you're inviting them into their team. So you could go get 2 other partners and collectively decide to redefine something together and find 2 people inside the company to work with you. And now all of a sudden you've got a transformation team, right? This is the kind of mindset that I want people to have, which is leadership isn't standing on a pedestal giving orders. Leadership is co-creating with a group of people to get extraordinary outcomes. So that's another one of the myths.
It's so, I mean, it's hiding in plain sight, right? The fact that what we think leadership is one thing. I mean, you paint this visual of a pedestal, and yet what leadership is sort of like cajoling. We're all in this together and inviting. What I love is the invitation that great ideas not only can they come from everywhere, but when they come from, one another from in sort of a co-leader or a team capacity, that it's literally better for everyone because we've all got unique perspectives.
Well, look, I mean, the other thing is your time.
Yeah.
Imagine if you're trying to transform your social media strategy, right? I have this actually. So, I'm a small entrepreneur myself. Maybe I have a big brand and maybe I charge a lot by the hour when I'm coaching, but I'm a small entrepreneur and I have a social media team. I have a group of individuals, a couple of folks in the Philippines. I have somebody out of DC. And then I've got my own team, right? I've got my own team who is in my sales organization who have a real strong grasp of what my message is. That is the social media team. My job is to get out of their way. By the way, right. The Philippine group and the DC group are all independent contractors. They don't work at Ferrazzi Greenlight. And, and one of the 2 people who is, quote, from Ferrazzi Greenlight is also an independent contractor. So I want to recognize that team, my job is to make that team crush it together, give each other feedback, critique each other, push each other, make each other work harder, make each other to elevate their competencies, give each other the kind of criticism when they're not being accountable for what they need to be. If I had to sit there and play whack-a-mole with everybody on that team, I wouldn't be able to do the things that I do uniquely well. And so I want everybody to realize what teamship really is it's a commitment to get a group of people with a shared mission, having a strong relationship, collaborating effectively, and really having each other's back to a point where they're going to give each other candor, hold each other accountable, kick each other in the butt, lift each other up. you want people working for your mission like that.
So I was just going to shift gears and get into some of the tactics. And you just mentioned a few there. And early on in the book, again, Never Lead Alone is the book here. We all get a copy of this. But early on in the book, you shift from this sort of like us them mentality to a really open candor. You talk about avoiding, it's not necessarily about avoiding conflict, it's about creating candor such that you can, work together to achieve, again, as you said, better outcomes. So what role does that, it's really clear, I think, culturally clear when you're inside an organization and you have a quote boss, but it's very sort of obtuse and I think unclear culturally when you hire contractors who are, as you just painted the picture on your own social media team. Like, how ought we think about shifting that from conflict to candor? What's your advice there?
So there's two things. Let me actually describe how the book works. I believe that there are 10 critical shifts that most groups of people need to make while they're working together. You can call them a team, right? Yep. There's 10 critical shifts. And you mentioned it, one of the most important shifts is moving from being conflict avoidant to being candid and transparent. I think a lot of us are conflict avoidant. We're conflict avoidant even with our spouses. We're conflict avoidant with people. We think people are delicate. We're afraid of challenging and critiquing individuals. The first thing we need to do is set a new social contract. So every one of the chapters of the book gives you coaching on how to bring up this conversation. So one of the questions I ask a team leader or somebody like yourself to ask your team is this: do we challenge each other courageously? So you as a leader should say to the group of people working together, while we're working together in this project, we have to challenge each other courageously. We have to be willing to speak truth in the room. And if I catch anybody talking behind anyone's back in a way that you wouldn't say it to their face, then I'm going to bring it back to the group. So just be aware that we have to put it all on the table candidly and transparently so we could all be working from the same set of data. There's an old phrase that people believe in. And by the way, so much of work is wrong-headed. And I'm blowing up myths all the time in this book. So everyone will say you critique people privately and you praise them publicly. I mean, that sort of makes sense. We've heard it so frequently. But I'll tell you why that's wrong. Because you or somebody on the team might think one way. And if you challenge somebody in the room openly and you say, I think what you're doing here is wrong, or that was a misstep, etc. And then if you do that privately, you don't have the entire team's weighing in on what they think. So if you say it publicly, then you can have somebody else chime in and say, well, I believe something differently. I actually think that was the right answer. And this is why. Or, yes, I do believe that's correct. And they shouldn't have done this. So now the person receiving the data is corroborated by multiple pieces of data so that they can make a better decision. Yeah. The bottom line is, in this rather volatile age we're living in today, we don't have time for back channel conversations. We got to put all the data on the table, clearly and courageously, make bold decisions and move on to the next bold decision we need to make. So what the book does is it has a set of practices. So the first is negotiate the social contract. We all agree, pinky swear, we're going to be courageously candid. Yes. Next step is put new practices in place. So I don't believe, the book doesn't talk about concepts. I believe they're bullshit. I believe mindset is bullshit. I only focus on practice. And I know that sounds really crazy that mindset is bullshit. Of course, mindset's important, but you change mindset by changing practice. So for instance, if we were to have a challenging conversation that we want to have, I would rather send an email out to everybody or send a shared Google Doc out to everybody and say, we're going to have a meeting. Here's some questions I have before that meeting. Like, we failed last month's revenue goals or whatever. What do you think the real problem is? And what do you think a bold solution is that could fix it? And you send that out to the 5 people in your team. But everybody can see everybody's answers. So do it in a Google Sheet or a Google Doc where everybody sees everybody else's answers. Now, everybody gets to be thoughtful and they get to be courageous and they write it down. Psychological safety, which is that thing where people are safe to be bold and courageous, it goes up 85% when you're sitting at home being thoughtful and typing versus in a room of people where you're being put on the spot. So a simple act of asking a question before a meeting and asking people, reminding people that they have to be courageous and bold because that's our social contract, will get you the outcome you're looking for, which is a robust dialogue. So that's the point is you create a social contract and then you put a practice in place that makes it easy. That's how simple this is.
That's what I love. And when I said hiding in plain sight, I think we've all been in some way, shape, or form have tapped into it. My background is in athletics and sports, and a lot of those principles translate nicely over to business. And when I think about the highest performing teams, and again, I'm going to keep reminding us that when we talk about teams, this is not inside a big organization necessarily. We can be, a group of independent co-conspirator collaborators or some contractors that I brought together to help us rally around a project. I just launched a book not too long ago, and we had some in-house people, some out-of-house people, and we were meeting regularly. So just so everyone who's listening and watching right now remembers what we talk about when we're saying team, but the highest performing teams that I have ever participated in professionally, sports wise, a couple things were true. The social contract was very clearly stated up front. We are here to kick ass and have an awesome time doing it. And everyone knows it feels good to be successful. It feels great to get the most out of yourselves and one another. And that's what we're coming together to do. We're going to do it like this. And I cannot overstate how clear, again, when I take in information, when I read your book, I'm constantly reminding myself of these applications in my own life where it matched up with what Keith was saying. And when it didn't, and when it did, we were high functioning, high performing teams when we were, living in a world that you're articulating here. And then I think about the times where we were broken and sucking swamp water and we were out of a line with what you're talking about here.
So sports teams, right? I mean, it's so funny that I don't know how many of your listeners care about sports, but I'll tell you, winning teams in sports don't win if they don't have a strong team.
For
right?
Sure.
It's like they used to say like the team never started winning until Jordan learned to pass the ball, not take all the shots, right? So how does a team work effectively that you're leading? In sports, the real conversation happens in the huddle. The real conversation happens in the locker room. Coach doesn't even have to be there. Yeah. So your job as a team leader is to get the team to be high functioning without you. Yep. That's the point. What I'm really, like leadership talks about the leader's job. I'm telling you, your job is to make the team high functional. If you can make the team high functional, you will be exponential in your success. Because now you're going to have a revenue management team, you're going to have a marketing team, you're going to have a delivery team, you're going to have this team, that team. And with all of that going on, you get free time that you can take the strategy of the business forward. You get time to start new businesses. Chapter 2 of the book starts with a wonderful solopreneur named Sergey Young, who started he had a prior business in financial advisory. And he started a brand new business while he was running his other business. He was taking his other business 10x by letting his team step up, which allowed him to start an entirely new business while his old team was going 10x. That's the promise of teamship for you, which is it's freedom. It's freedom.
Well, and there's a line in the book, the world's best teams don't win because of leadership alone. They win largely because of their teamship. Yeah. To me, that is a nutshell right there. And again, I just have to keep bringing the topic back to what does that look like when you empower someone else? And especially I don't think anyone who's listening or watching believes that the future of work looks a ton like the past. But the way that we miscalculate the things that are different and the things that are the same is, like you said, we over ascribe to where you show up. Are you dialing in via Zoom? Are you in person? Of course, those things are so different. But the fundamentals, the what's going to be successful is being able to bring people together in, alignment of a common goal or outcome, I
Yeah.
think is the word you like to use a lot of outcomes. And how can we elevate other people to kick ass? And to me,
Bob,
yeah,
I'll give you another myth,
great.
and that is that we collaborate in meetings. No, we should be landing the plane in meetings, not collaborating in meetings. Let me explain
Yeah.
what I mean. So let's say you've got a problem with some part of your business, and you should, instead of saying, I want to have a meeting on that, what I want you to do is pause for a second and identify who the 5 members of that team is, 5 people who could help you redefine the solution to the problem. So whatever you could put an hypothesis, but whatever that problem is, I pick 5 people. Maybe one's a client, maybe one works for me, maybe one is a vendor of mine, whatever. Maybe one is just a good friend who knows my business and knows me, right? So there's 5 folks. Then I want you to reach out to them and say, okay, here's what I think the problem is. And that's the conversation I want to have with you. Ideally, that should be closer to outcomes, meaning I'm struggling with this outcome. It's not working well. And then you ask everybody, what do you think the real problem is? And what do you think a bold solution would be to answer it? Ask them that in an asynchronous non-meeting. Now, what you're doing is you're giving 5 people time to be thoughtful. You're giving them time to be creative. And then everybody reads the answer before they show up at a meeting and engineer the meeting to land the plane on some ideas that came up, not to start the conversation. If you have a meeting to start the conversation, I promise you, you're going to have 2 or 3 meetings after that.
Yeah.
If you start using what I call 21st century collaboration tactics, which is using asynchronous tools like Google Docs and other things, which are free to you to use out there. There's lots of collaborative software that allows you to reach out to people. And you're not even bounded by 5 people. You could have 30 people in this conversation prior to the meeting. And you get a much more abundant, rich set of inputs that you can then analyze and make bolder decisions on. So, like we even think that meetings are the primary form of collaboration. Meetings are the last form of collaboration. It slows you down. Only the extroverts speak. You're not going to get the full voice that you need from everybody that you want to hear from.
There's a particular page I've got dog-eared here in my copy. It's 117, and it's teamship practice, scheduling, asynchronous prep. And that's, again, to emphasize this. So in my organization, we're big on Loom videos.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the stuff that we do is visual. So Google Docs plus Loom videos are a great way to, you can basically embed a link. And if you're not familiar with Loom, it allows you, your face is in the corner and you can share your screen while you're talking, and you get to put your point of view out there, whether it's with Google Docs or whatnot. But to me, the big realization was actually encouraging time that is scheduled to prepare for the meeting where you're landing the planes. And that especially in the creative world, because there's so many variables. Like if I ask you to show up with a design for something and I've got 2 different people, like the results can be 100 miles apart. Well, getting on the same page, encouraging people to spend time in advance of the meeting, schedule that time, because if you don't schedule it, it's not going to hit. And then you show up, it's a completely different connective process when you're in that meeting trying to land planes, as opposed to just riffing, which, as you said earlier, it leads to 4 or 5 other meetings downstream, which are very expensive and usually non-performant.
Well, and let me, make that point. If I've got a day, I'm just looking at my calendar right here. If I've got a full day, a bunch of phone calls, meeting, whatever I've got, I have blocked out in red as if it was a meeting, a half of an hour slot where I'm getting ready for another meeting. Right. And that's the point. That's called async prep. We tend to let our day get filled, and the valuable time to read something, to think about something, that gets squeezed to nights and weekends and often doesn't get done at all.
Yeah.
So we've got to be very conscious of how we manage our time and very transparent and candid about it. Put it into your calendars. And by the way, when somebody gives you something, they need to tell you this should take 15 minutes of your time, or this should take an hour of your time. What we then train each other on is when somebody gives you something and said, this should take a half of an hour of your time. And then you go back to them and say, this took 2 hours of my time, which is fine that it needed to take 2 hours, but I want us to learn how to condition what we give and the expectations we're setting, et cetera.
Big fan of this has been an archetype in the Amazon universe for some time. It's essentially publish a memo prior to the meeting. The slight difference here is you encourage this asynchronous participation with writing what you think down, because it allows you to be thoughtful in advance of the meeting, versus spending in the Amazon universe, spending the first 10 minutes reading the tightly performed memo with the goal of like what you want to come out of it. But essentially this is, as you talk about, 21st century tooling and 21st century process for decision making.
What we're both saying in those examples, and I would like to comment on the Amazon example.
Yep.
What we're both saying is what my dad used to say to me. It's the 7 Ps. Prior proper planning prevents piss poor performance. So if we show up in the room and swag it, we'll have significantly less thoughtfulness than if we've thought about it in advance. Now, let's talk about the debate between everybody. A memo is prepared and everybody reads it at the same time when you show up, and everybody comments on it real time in the meeting and then starts the conversation. One, it still requires people who are fast thinkers to be the ones that benefit in this. Yeah. Like, I actually like to read things slowly. I like to consume, but if all of a sudden I'm asked, read this one pager and we're going to start in 5 minutes, I panic. It's like, I don't think as well as if it might only take me 5 minutes, but the panic of having to read it in 5 minutes is just a psychology thing. And I also think that if you do it outside, some people need more processing time. And some people would go as far as to ask their own teams to comment. So, sometimes I'll be in a meeting where somebody will say one thing and they seem to reverse their decision later. What I find out is they got more data after the fact, and as opposed to if they had the question in advance, they could have asked their team, they could have asked other people, they could have collected good data and then have a final answer. So I actually have been trying to get Amazon to do the pre-reads before, and I'm getting some good traction over at AWS on that.
Well, it sounds like, you do a lot of research in your universe, and at least my understanding of it from your previous work, and you get to see across a bunch of different industries and different practices. And a lot of these are, cutting edge companies. You talk about, Drew Houston at Dropbox and IBM. You've got, myriad of examples, a lot from technology. But to me, leadership, whether you're leading in one industry or another, is fundamentally the same. And decision-making processes, it's fundamentally the same. You need to get data. And as Steve Jobs famously said, I don't necessarily hire smart people and tell them what to do. I hire smart people and have them tell us what to do. So would you agree that leadership is fundamentally stable and isn't really changing the fundamental principles? Or would you say that leadership is radically transforming because it's now team and not lead from the pedestal?
Yeah, I think it's more radical than most people think.
Okay.
First of all, I want to say something to your listeners, which is, you may or may not know it, but the reason you like Chase's podcast is he actually prepares. He's made a number of comments that, since we've been talking, that makes me recognize that he's really prepared. He's read the book. He's got comments. He's etc. I'm on a book tour, right? So I've given a bunch of interviews, and that is far from the case in many instances. So I just want to go ahead and thank you for that. The next thing is I do think this is pretty radical. In fact, I'll be so radical to make an hypothesis for some point in the future, particularly given that AI is now our partner, similar to a person is our partner. So that's something we could chat about a little bit. And I talked about it in chapter 6, which is technology is your partner. Yep. Technology is your partner. And you've got to ask yourself, how do we all co-create the future? I believe that the future of leadership is going to look more what I call holacratic. So holacracy is a philosophy of leadership that means the team is self-managing. It doesn't need a leader. It doesn't need a manager.
Tony Shea, a pioneer of that, right?
So Tony was one of my best friends, and we lost him very tragically during the pandemic. And I actually started the Tony Shea Award in his honor. By the way, if any of you listening feel that you're an innovator around practices of human capital, practices of business, go to thetonysheaaward.com and apply for the award. No one's going to fill Tony's shoes, but maybe thousands of us collectively applying for the award in the years to come can begin to do so. So what I have found, though, is that about 40% of the people applying for the award and getting radical lifts in productivity in their business are doing so because of a thing called holacracy, because of self-managed teams. These are companies, some of them big companies, that are experimenting with putting a group of people together, giving that group of people a vision for where they're going. And the team has to negotiate its North Star. The team has to negotiate its KPIs. The team has to negotiate its critical hills to take. And then the team has to negotiate how it works together, how it assigns work, what its deliverable dates are. And most of the time, they adopt relatively what's called Agile practices, where the team gets back together again and on a weekly basis renegotiates everything and says what's on track, what needs to change, etc. Such a powerful idea that I think this book, which starts to herald the idea of teamship over leadership, I think you spin ahead 10 years, we're going to look back and say that was the first time we started hearing about it. But the principle of teamship is more important than the principle of leadership.
Fascinating. And you've said in previous conversations and earlier, even in this one, that in the leader, if you are the head of your organization and you've assembled some people to go forward and build something in service of your vision, that a lot of these practices, the goal of them is actually to free you up.
Yes.
To focus on strategy, in particular, the strengths of, in this case, the founder or the artist at the core of what it is that you're building. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about that.
We all have our superpowers, and very few of them, if we're a creative, is managerial.
Yeah.
Not suggesting that's true of everybody, but it's certainly true of me. I'm not a great manager, and the ability to let a group of people and you get out of their way. One of the saddest things that I have to look at my history is that I've curtailed the growth of my business significantly by not getting out of its way, by not hiring or onboarding the right group of people and giving them this social contract to pursue with each other, to come back to me and blow me away with outcomes and results. My social is a pretty good example of where I've done it well. And I can give you many examples of where I've done it poorly, most of which is sales, interestingly enough, because I've always thought of myself as critical to the sell. And as a result, I've inserted way too much of myself into the selling process. And as a result, never really scaled the sales process effectively, because I put too much of myself into it. And again, I don't know if that makes sense for a lot of people listening, but damn it, as entrepreneurs, we get in our own way so much. And the key is to work yourselves out of as many jobs as possible by creating a team and coaching them, encouraging them. There's an entire chapter in the book around celebration. Maybe we should pause on that for a second.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of us as entrepreneurs are scarcity minded. A lot, and believe it or not, I mean, what I have found in my research is that entrepreneurs, even though they believe anything's possible for themselves, they're also constantly fearful of not having enough and always having to hustle, hustle, hustle. That scarcity mindedness will often lead us to treat ourselves poorly. And it will also lead us to constantly be perfectionists, not only in ourselves, but everybody else around us. And sometimes it's not the happiest place to work. And so as entrepreneurs, we've got to be really good at celebration. Celebration is the fuel in the tank. It's the energy. It's what's going to lift people's, spirits and hope and help people have the psychological safety. If everybody is in critter state, like constantly fight, flight, state, you're not going to get the best out of people. And, I'm very hard on myself, and I have typically been very hard on my teams. And I'm learning how important, even though I've written about it for years, how much more important celebration is. There's an entire chapter on what needs to be done. But again, you don't even have to do it all yourself. The team needs to celebrate each other. You need to put practices in place. So again, the book is written as every chapter, every shift has a hero story, a really short one, just a couple pages. Mm-hmm. And then a bunch of practices that you start to use to make that shift happen. And there's a whole set of practices to help the team celebrate each other.
Yeah, check-ins, energy check-ins. Let's, for just hypothetically, what are some ways that people ought to be celebrating differently without them having to read the book? Just especially solopreneurs and small team leaders like the majority of people are listening and watching now, or even if you're an entrepreneur inside an organization, you have a small team. Like, what are some fundamental practices for celebrating?
I think a monthly team shout out is really powerful. Once a month, have everybody in the team go around and say, here's who I'm grateful for and why. Here's who I'm grateful for and why. And what that has two components to it. One is people get told and get celebrated by their peers. Two, they get told why. And three, the people who are listening can dial into that and know, if I want to make if I want to be helpful to so-and-so, this is their love language. This is what they want, right? Also, if you show up 3 months in and Joe or Jane aren't getting shouted out by anybody, that sure says something to them, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That a teammate isn't being celebrated. Well, it could be because they're not really moving into the team in a generous and a gracious manner. So it's actually a peer-to-peer coaching mechanism for that as well. It's such a simple practice, but it goes a long way.
Yeah, I think the example you gave was at one of the airlines.
JetBlue.
Yeah, JetBlue. And look, again, I think a lot of or it's easy to see this in a corporate setting, and yet it's even more profound in a small group setting to give people shout outs and the recognition, just the basic recognition. Somebody, went the extra mile, stayed up late to deliver something that was above and beyond, just calling that out. And in a smaller setting, even a higher frequency is something that I've experienced as a leader is valuable. There's some sweet spot between monthly and daily. Like if you're just always pouring praise and it's sort of like the mutual admiration society, then it's sort of like a white ribbon. Everyone gets celebrated for everything all the time. Then it's, you've kind of diluted it, but there is a sweet spot in there. And to me, it's, it's probably the line of work that you're in, the size of your team, but this is where the calibration, you just want to over index on this celebratory part. It also evokes play when we're in that state, not in this fight, freeze, fawn universe. When we're in this, there's a levity, a state of play, and a state of recognition and celebration. That's just, again,
if you've got a social media vendor who's working for you And working for you means they feel good about themselves. Working for somebody else means they constantly feel under the gun and afraid. Where do you think they're going to index their time? Right? I mean, they're going to want to stay up that extra minute for you versus somebody else. They'll be like, screw it. I'm not going to get praised no matter what I do, let alone why am I giving up my Saturday afternoon for this person?
Talked about, there's just a list on page 143, weekly celebration of achievements, a monthly celebratory round robin of peer recognition, formal celebrations, just, essentially seeding recognition. I thought that was really interesting.
I just like the gratitude circle.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm reading my own book for you. Why you just brought me to the right page.
There you go.
I love gratitude circles. At the end of any meeting or gathering you might have, ask everybody to go around and express in the last hour that we've been together, what are they most grateful for? And, having an attitude of gratitude, we always hear the power of that. That is so meaningful because it's so easy for us to be critical. It's so easy for us to be down on ourselves, particularly, by the way, when we're not winning. Sometimes the market's tough. I've spoken to so many people this year who said they had a flat year or worse. And, it was a tough year for a lot of people. But this is the right time to count your blessings. One of my sons, God bless him, he has such a difficult time seeing the silver lining. And it actually makes him sick. I was coaching him this weekend. He's got a horrible flu and a cold and all this stuff. And I was like, wow, isn't it interesting? Your flus and colds always correlate with stressful times in your life. He literally makes himself sick with worry and self-doubt. And I'm constantly trying to get him to just be grateful. So I've got him actually on a morning practice where every morning he has to text me with 3 things that he's grateful for that morning and 3 things he's looking forward to that day.
Wow.
And he texts me every morning and I have a little reminder. I've got 6 boys. So I'm constantly running around playing whack-a-mole, but it's also nice when I make my boys the team, when they're each other's team. Right. And so I'm getting them to have each other's back. And the family unit practices teamship as well. And by the way, you're never allowed to say the same thing you're grateful for twice ever.
Whoa.
So for the rest of your life, you're always finding that extra little thing you're grateful for. And what is beautiful about that is, the little things are the things that you start to dial up on.
Let's talk about a team of seekers.
Yeah, I love that one. It's one of my favorite. So I've always thought of myself as a seeker in that I think in the beginning, it was out of self-doubt. I mean, I was a poor kid from Pittsburgh that got into rich schools. And I was always questioning myself. Do I deserve to be in this room? Am I good enough, etc.? And so as a result, I was constantly thirsting to be better, to get better. And I've always sought out things that would elevate myself in some way or another, whether it's a Tony Robbins retreat or a Vipassana meditation retreat or just asking for feedback or getting coaching or therapy or whatever. I've always been a seeker. But that's not true of everybody. Another one of my boys has a real challenge with asking for help and asking and seeing his own challenge in a problem, right? He'll see a problem, but then he blames others. And by the way, all of my boys came from foster care or adoption, which is, there's a lot of trauma in young adults when they're in foster care. They come from abused homes. So, the kind of conversations I'm having with my kids a lot of it is born from very early childhood trauma, and many of us have that.
Yes.
I think one of the things people miss is how prevalent PTSD is in this world from normal things that we've all experienced, and we suffer for the rest of our lives in these things. But again, the team can help you be a seeker. So number one, to be a seeker means you're willing to give and get feedback. So I do a thing among the team at least every quarter You could do it more frequently. It's called an open 360. Everybody goes around and says, what I most admired about you in the last month is X. Boom, boom, boom. And then everybody goes around and says, because I care about your success, next month I might suggest. Now, what's interesting about that is the admiration piece, which no one's going to be defensive about, is about the last month. But instead of the criticism be about the last month, I make the criticism a gift of what we should do different forward going. I don't want to, when you're giving peer-to-peer feedback among a team, it's easy for people to get defensive and start to say, well, I didn't do it that way. It's like, literally screw it. Don't be critical of the last month. Be corrective of suggesting for the next month. I might suggest.
Powerful.
Yeah. There's a social contract around feedback that is, I think, broken. Every time in the past we used to get feedback, it came with a directive. Our parents gave us feedback. They weren't giving us advice. They were telling us what to do. When your coach gave you feedback, he was telling you what to do. She was telling you what to do. When your boss gave you feedback, they were telling you what to do. When your peers give you feedback, they're giving you inputs. Very important. Part of the social contract of being a seeker is that your job is to seek as much data, not direction. Seek as much data from the broadest group of individuals so that you can then make a decision on what you want to do differently. And that's true of the team. The team realizes that their job isn't to give each other direction. Their job is to give each other data and inputs. That's so powerful. And it also relieves the pressure of giving and receiving that data because it's just data. The person doesn't have to do anything with it. But over a period of time, by the way, if somebody keeps refusing data, that says something in and of itself.
Yeah. I'm taking a note here. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Very powerful. So what was most surprising in the research that you did for this book? What was the most surprising outcome? Something that was late breaking and came into the book, or it was another one of those things that's hiding in plain sight? What was surprising about as you distilled all your ideas down? These things are fascinating for me as an author, but they also tend to be really beautiful nuggets that, in a page, everything that, is a word on a page has a similar weight. So, this is essentially a question of, can you scrape aside some of the context and highlight a couple things that you were either most surprised with in the data, or that you found the most powerful or surprising in some other capacity?
I'm not sure this is what you're getting at, but here's how I'd like to interpret your question. I'd answer it in two ways. The idea that this book is really more for the team itself than it is for the leader. That didn't really hit me until the end. I'd written this book, and I think as I was writing it with the presumption that it was going to be for a leader who was then going to prescribe it for the team. But I realized that in reality, it's a prescription for any team member to change the team. And it's a definition of every team member, what it means to be a teammate. So I realized the book, I actually had to go back and change some of the marketing language. I went back and did a quick scrub of the book. And I got rid of this idea that it's a book given to the team by the leader or directed by the leader. And I realized it's a book that any teammate could give the teammates and say, wouldn't this be a better way for us to work together?
That's so insightful. And what I couldn't deny why you were saying that is that we're all teammates. Yeah. We're all teammates, right? To me, that's why I continually was reading this material, both through the lens of, as a leader of, my own company, personal brand, and other, learning companies that I've started and been acquired. And yet it's like, I am a teammate in so many of these situations.
Again, you will be a better leader for realizing you're just a teammate.
Yeah.
That's the point. And that means you'll expect more from your team if you're just a teammate, and stop thinking of leadership as this maypole where everybody is dancing around you with ribbons, and your relationship was with them, and like get off that pedestal, and it's a team. And then the other thing, I have to tip my hat to a dear friend of mine, Justin, who called me. He read the book. He read a pre-release of the book, and the book was called, I think the book was called Teamship. Like I had this idea that I really wanted to be primary on the idea of teamship, that I wanted to announce that teamship is the big aha here. And he called me and he said, Keith, I got a better title for your book, and I'm surprised you didn't come up with it. 20 years ago, this is him speaking. He said, 20 years ago, you wrote a book that changed my life. It was called Never Eat Alone. And it was about redefining networking and redefining how important relationships are in our lives for success. And if your audience, I think, we might have probably done one of these on Never Eat Alone in the past. But and he said, your book is, you're in the 20th year anniversary of your book. The title of this book is Never Lead Alone. So it's from Never Eat Alone to Never Lead Alone, a 20-year journey. And I have to tip my hat to him. I really appreciated that last minute. It changed. The original title of the book that was announced at Amazon was Teamship. And we had to, reverse all the marketing in the last minute and change the name.
Well, I will give you a hat tip. As you were hat tipping to Justin, I'll hat tip to you. And my most recent book, which came out a month ago, instant bestseller, is called Never Play It Safe.
Love it.
And there's, to me, that's a risky title. Everything in my universe has always been very positive and affirmative and affirming.
Oh, right.
And this concept of never was a risk. And the irony is that one of the reasons that I leaned into that title is because I had a little yellow sticky note as I was rewriting the book in the final weeks. It would said, don't play it safe. And it occurred to me like, okay, what's the biggest idea here? And it's essentially that all the best stuff in our life is on the other side of our comfort zone. And never play it safe was it just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I used your book, Never Eat Alone, and Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference, as two examples of standout books in the industry that have leaned into this never concept. So I'm hat tipping to you for hat tipping to Justin, but it's just a fantastic.
By the way, both of us had the same writing partner, Chris and I.
No. Oh, nice. Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah, well, it doesn't surprise me that the titles would be so similar that way.
Of course. And again, just so we're clear for everyone who's listening and watching, Never Lead Alone, 10 Shifts from Leadership to Teamship, is not a corporate book. It is a book that every independent, if you're a team member, as Keith just sort of articulated, as we all are, like, this book is incredibly valuable. It helps you see how to lift others up. And especially in this next chapter of my life, and so many people that I've been talking to, it's like, wow, what if we could do a better job of showing up as the fan or the peer that we wish we had? That's what this book is for. If you want to elevate, whatever process you're running, wherever, the team, the word team, however, if it's 2 or 3 of you or 10 or 20 of you, it's a very, very insightful book that I got a lot of joy reading. Again, I had the hardback just arrived, or the galley just arrived rather, and I've been reading the PDF. So highlighting in a PDF is a pain in the ass, and I'll tell you, I highlighted a lot. So thank you very much for the book. Again, it's called Never Lead Alone, 10 Shifts from Leadership to Teamship. Anywhere you would steer us, besides, of course, picking up a copy of the book, but in support of what it is that you're doing?
At keithferrazzi.com, there'll be other resources you can grab. But one of the things I recently did is I published a video series around the book. So every chapter, I did a video that's as me coaching the team. And if you buy the book for your team, we give you the video series for free, so that everybody can follow along chapter by chapter. And all of that and other resources are at keithferrazzi.com.
Yeah, team diagnostics, that was interesting, and agreements, like we're all showing up and we're agreeing that we're going to do this, 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 and this. It's sort of like how to get everybody on the same page. Also super powerful. Keith, thanks so much for being a guest on the show. Again, I mentioned the title a couple times. One last time here, Never Lead Alone, 10 Shifts from Leadership to Teamship. Keith, you're always welcome on the show. Thanks for being a shining example of how to be a good leader, and good luck with those 6 boys. I bet you got your hands full. And until next time, signing off from Keith and myself, thanks so much for listening.